Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the Grumpy Sound Guy Show. It is Wednesday. It is that time again, yes. Today we're going to talk about the differences in mixing a club secular event as compared to church production and mixing in a church. I had a follower reach out to me and ask me to have a conversation with you guys, specifically in long format about this subject. So that is going to be our topic for the day. Stick around. You do not want to miss a second of today's show. Hey guys, if I could just have a moment of your time to talk to you about this channel. 49.8% of you guys watching this right now is not subscribed to this channel. Will you please hit that subscription button? It doesn't cost anything to subscribe to the channel on the public side here. And then that gives us tools and resources and for my marketing team to be able to do what we need to do to get this content out to people who really enjoy this sort of thing. The other thing is, if you're super digging this and you'd like a deeper look into my world, then subscribe to the paid side of the YouTube channel. You can join for about the cost of a cup of coffee a month, and then I do vlogs over there. I post content that never goes public, and I let you into my world. I let you into the CLP audio world, and I let you see what our day-to-day life looks like. Love you guys. Thank you for the support. Welcome back. So, man, this whole thing is a loaded question for me, because I spent when I came off the road in '94, I spent from that time about 15 years forward, for the most part, floating around from church to church, doing church production. My kids were super young. I started having kids in '94. That's really the reason why I came off the road in '94. So I wanted to be a little closer to home, wanted to be a better father than my own father, and really just try to be there for my kids. So that's kind of where all this started with me as far as CLP. CLP stands for Christ-like Productions. Everybody thinks it stands for clip, like it's some tongue-in-cheek joke. No, it actually, from about the mid-90s until, I don't know, 2012 or so, 2010, something like that, it was Christ-like Productions. And I predominantly I was on staff at a couple churches, paid staff. I'm still paid staff at a small church in Gaithersburg right now as a audio guy, tech director, consultant kind of thing. So I've been in and out of the church production deal for a very long time. One of the churches that I worked at was a big, huge super church. We did big, Christmas and Easter productions with 150 cast members and dance team and banner team and, all this other crazy stuff. So I have been on every front of that industry as well as the secular industry. So I got a lot to say about this, and, mixing between the two. I always, let me just start out by saying this, because there's political things that have to be stated here before we even get to the technical stuff. The only difference I've ever found between church and, say, mixing in a club is alcohol. There are good and bad people in both environments. There are hypocrites in both environments. Of course, there's hypocrites at my local gym. There's guys who claim that they're all about fitness, and meanwhile I see them shoving a sundae down their throat around the corner to Dairy Queen. So hypocrites are everywhere. It's not just in church. Let me say, there is no perfect church. If you're going to church to expect perfection and expect a pastor who never screws up, you're probably going to be disappointed. So with all that being said, the church brings an enormous amount of social dynamics that are radically different than the social dynamics in a club. In a club, it's kind of like, pull the Band-Aid off quick kind of mentality. By that, what I mean is people don't play around in clubs, man. In clubs, it's about making money. In church, it's about helping people connect with God. So there's two different, motivations there, but they both should equally be striving for excellence. And the problem is that's not the case. In a nightclub, if you suck and you don't put any people into place and you're hard to work with, you got an ego, it's only a matter of time before that gets out and the bar just doesn't call you back anymore, or they don't want you to mix anymore. There's places where I'm not welcome because, I don't put up with a bunch of bull butter, and I kind of call things as they are. I don't smile and nod my way through life. I talk about the elephant in the room, and what I have come to realize is not everyone is ready for that level of truth. So I'm trying to dance around people's feelings more and more these days. And let's face it, the entitlement movement is completely out of control, in the club scene. So there's some of that. But the long and short of it is, the band in a club is trying to do their best. They're striving for excellence. Many of them are videotaping every performance and critiquing that. Many of them invite their peers out to critique them. Many of them are investing their own money out of their own pocket to hire guys like me that can come and help them be the best that they can be and be a team player. So they are focused on excellence. They want to bring excellence to the table from every perspective. They have no problem opening their own wallet. They have no problem, in many cases, paying a guy like me half of what the band's making, or sometimes more than half. But they see that as an investment in trying to get them to the next level, because they know the better they sound, the better they look, the more professional they look, then the more success they're going to find. In the church, there's a radically different culture. In the church, we have to dance around people's feelings. We don't want to offend anyone. I have seen countless churches allow people on stage who think that they're some kind of singer or musician. In their mind, they think that they're really something. Maybe their family has told them how great they are, and that sort of thing. Many churches don't do auditions. Many churches don't, even sit down and have a conversation with the person. They just kind of let them on stage, let them start showing up to rehearsal, and boom, there it is. In the bigger churches, that's not usually the case. Usually there's someone in the organization who's focused on excellence, and they're just not going to allow that kind of bull butter on their platform. In the church, they call a stage a platform. I don't know why that is the case. It's still a stage, but a little different lingo there. Maybe because they call it a platform instead of a stage, they don't feel like it's such an entertainment thing, that it's more of a worship thing. Again, that's, church politics that I really don't have time for. It's a stage, okay? It's whatever platform, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. So what happens is, and now that we're in this culture of live streaming, boy, live streaming has really brought the warts to the surface. Let me just say that. You can't lie on live streaming. It's like the studio. You can't lie in the studio. You can go back and fix it. You can maybe manipulate it or auto-tune it, but the original recording is going to show whatever the real level of talent is that went into the microphone, and live stream is kind of the same way. It's usually a direct input line. You don't have room acoustics or stage volume to hide your bull butter. it's there, dude. So we are seeing some scary live streaming stuff come out of the church production market these days. Also, I guess I should probably say that it's only like 5 or 7% or something of churches have a congregation over like 600 or 700 people faithfully. So, over 90% of the churches in America are small churches. So there's something to be said for that as far as resources and that sort of thing. And I'm leading up to the actual technical mixing aspects of this conversation. I'm trying to lay some groundwork here into the conversation and frame it in the correct manner. But when you don't, and I started talking about this. I started a new series in the shorts this week called Church Production. It was part 1. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a church production short every Sunday moving forward. So if you're a follower, that's what, and you've been asking, because I've had a bunch of people ask me about church production stuff, that we're going to kind of just designate Sundays as that day to talk about church production. So that's kind of how that's going to roll. And I have been mentioning, the first part that I put out was just this obvious thing, like, why put 12 warm bodies on stage that can't sing? You should probably just put 3 people on stage who really can sing, and you'll get a way better result, from that. We have to get out of this mentality of, well, I don't want to hurt, brother or sister so-and-so's, feelings. I don't want to get in this situation where, they're mad and they're going to leave the church because we won't let them sing and blah, blah, blah. And I always say, and I have said this for decades, that if their faith and commitment to the church is so fragile that if you don't let their karaoke singing behind on stage, that they're going to leave the church, then I think you're better off to let them walk. I mean, is that really what you're there for? I mean, are you attending this church just so you can have a place to exercise your wannabe vocal abilities or whatever? And I have personally seen some horrendous performances in church. And everybody just, oh, it's okay, brother, God bless it. It's okay, God bless it, and it's like, nah, I don't think God's really cool with that. I'm a born-again Christian myself. I'm serving the same God, and I'm feeling like God's probably face-palming. Like, what are these? Come on, dude. I mean, can we just be honest with ourselves here? The Bible says, recognize the truth, and the truth will set you free. It will make you free. Maybe your volunteer time is better served, as a welcome person, or working in the parking lot, or volunteer with the kids or something, or whatever. There's plenty of places to get busy at the church. The church is always looking for help. But recognize, look in the mirror, and be honest about where you are as far as what you have to offer the church musically. And here's the thing that medium to big churches need to understand that aren't doing this, that aren't having auditions and, aren't really vetting people correctly, put it that way. They're not vetting people correctly. Is the really good musicians that's sitting in your congregation are never going to walk up and volunteer their time if there's the gong show going on, okay? That's the truth. I worked for 7 years in with the people in the community called the Walmart Church. It was a great church, and they weren't doing anything wrong. They were flawed like every other church, but they did a lot of good in the community. Just people hate on church for whatever reason. So they called it the Walmart Church. And they had a Wednesday service that they used to funnel up-and-comers into and let them go and be part of the Wednesday, service in a different part, like a smaller room on campus. We had a smaller room on campus to do Wednesday services in. And it was actually a really cool place to disciple people musically, because the music director was a genius in putting a couple heavy hitters on that team to help show the up-and-comers, how to get from point A to point B. Now, some people are never going to get to point B, no matter how much you work on them. But some people are just inexperienced and they need an opportunity to grow. That Wednesday service gave them that opportunity to grow, and it was genius. And there was many times that those Wednesday musicians would end up on the Sunday morning worship team a year down the road. It was a genius situation. It was absolutely wonderful, you know. So yeah, so that's, you know, we don't have any of that stuff in the club. You know, in the club, you can either play or you can't. And if you can't, people are going to let you know real quick. Or your phone's just going to stop ringing and no one's going to want to book you, or your agent's going to drop you, or whatever, dude, you know. If you're not putting butts in seats and making money, you have no value. Now, if you're a band that puts butts in seats and makes the bar money and still sucks, well, that's kind of the Achilles heel of the bar scene. We all know a band like that in your area, no matter where you're at in the whole world. And I got followers all over the globe that watch my content, and they all tell the same stories. Everybody has a band or two like that in their market that is just people flock to, they love, they worship, and the band, I wouldn't give you $500 a night for them. But they're playing the right set list. Maybe they look cute on stage, and maybe they're smart enough to play to their strengths and don't sing out of key too awful much. But I'm telling you, putting butts in seats in a club will always, always get the phone ringing more than anything else. But I digress. Church is radically different that way in all the ways I just mentioned. Now, let's move on to the actual technical mixing aspect of this and how I approach those two environments differently. In the simplest of terms, in a secular setting, I typically build my mix from the bottom up, which means drums, when I'm doing sound check, drums, bass, guitars, vocals. Maybe drums, bass, guitars, keyboard, horn section, and vocals. But vocals are the last thing. It's the icing we sprinkle on the cake, okay? In church, it's just the opposite. It's a top-down. In church, we start with the vocals because there's usually volume restraints. Even though we've had all this silent stage conversation and everything about clubs, clubs are still way more tolerant to volume than what churches are. Because little old ladies will start throwing their canes and umbrellas at you and, you know, put shaving cream on your car in the parking lot and, you know, smear Bengay all over your steering wheel or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, they will hate on you in a biblical fashion that will ruin your day. Not to mention all the Karens and the Chads and all the people who think they know something about, you know, sound because their buddy was a DJ in college or, you know, whatever, dude. You know, there's Karens in church too, just like there is in the clubs. Usually the church Karens are worse than the club Karens because the church Karens are usually much more entitled, if you can believe that. At least that's been my experience. But yeah, church is top down. So what I do is I establish the vocals at whatever my volume limit is. The last church I worked in, big church that I worked in, I think our volume peak was we could average about 91, 92 dB. We could peak 94 every now and then. No one would freak out. It was a big room. It seated 1,000 people. We did multiple services every Sunday. So that was kind of our thing. So I would establish vocals there and then layer everything underneath of it. Now, the other aspect of these two different mix philosophies is in the low volume environment, you have to be really good at frequency carving. Go back into my archives, and there is a mix video on frequency carving that happened about 1.5 years ago. Go check out that video. That'll tell you everything you want to know about frequency carving. But basically, in a nutshell, you're placing every instrument and every vocal in the band in its proper place frequency-wise. You start approaching your mix from a frequency standpoint instead of a volume standpoint. See, in rock and roll specifically, you know, and stuff like that, we just kind of volume muscled our way through things, you know. In the church, because you don't have volume as a tool to get your point across and to get things to cut through the mix the way you want them, you have to be really good at frequency carving and have a really good ear for frequency and put everything in its place. I still use that philosophy in the secular scene, but to a lesser degree, because I don't necessarily have to. I can do a 98 or 100 dB, and people typically won't complain about that. That's about where most live bands are in the real world. Now, if you get outside, you may be 94 to 96 or 8 or something, and that's a comfortable thing. If you want it louder, get closer to the stage. But most of our street festivals and our wine festivals and stuff like that, once you get behind front of house, it quickly gets down to like 70, 80 dB, 85 dB, and the people back there like that, because then they can sit there and have conversations with their friend while they're eating cheese and crackers at the wine festival, and everybody's happy. The hardcore people are up front close to the stage, getting what they want out of the mix and feeling the mix in the manner they want to feel it. In the church, when people start feeling that low end, a lot of times they start complaining. Now we got a church here local to where I'm at where, dude, they're balls out. It's actually kind of cool. And they really don't care if you don't like it, that it's loud or whatever. And it's kind of a rebel church, and I'm kind of digging it. It's kind of cool. I don't go there very often because I work most Sundays, or I'm so burnt out and didn't get into 5 a.m. that I just don't have the energy to get up and do a Sunday morning church routine. Plus, I don't play church. My relationship with God is 7 days a week. It's not just on Sundays. But yeah, I can remember here recently, just in the last couple of years, we had installed a new mixer and stuff in a church that I was working with, and I used a little bit of delay, in the vocal to really kind of, add that icing on the cake. Pastor immediately made a beeline for me and wanted to know what in the world you hear that echo? Do you hear that echo? Is something wrong? What's going on? I'm like, no, those are vocal effects. It's there to enhance the vocal and to make it more angelic. I'm trying to speak in church terms here. Oh, she's like, oh, you mean just for fun? And I'm like, never mind. I'll just turn it down. I've yet to ever run delay in that room again after that. Some people don't know what they don't know. And that's okay. They're happy. That's all that matters. I'm about making the client happy. The client is happy without the delay. They like a little bit of verb on stuff. That's it. Not too much of that. Oh man, we sound like we're in a cave, man. We're like, so you got all that in church to deal with. You know what I'm saying? If you are looking to like fall in love with the mix and to pull out all your, pro audio web forum tricks that you've learned from reading, the forums for 10 years, church is probably not the place that you're going to get the freedom to do that. Now, I will say church is a great place for young engineers to kind of go and sow their oats, because church is very forgiving, especially if you're a volunteer. If you're a paid staff, well, that's a little different thing altogether, because now you're held to a higher level of accountability. But it's a great place to grow if you're retired and don't want to go beat the club scene anymore. And maybe you have physical issues that don't allow you to be able to go and hump gear like you used to. Church is a great, safe place to go and be able to mix a nice, warm service, every week and on midweek rehearsal, and kind of get your thrills with mixing that way. Churches are always looking for good sound guys. Now, here's the other side of the conversation, financial. I want to be real careful here because I don't want to call anybody out. When I left the church market, for the most part, probably 85% of what I do is in the secular world now. I immediately started making what I should have been making for a very long time. The money was much better in the secular market than it was in the church. The church will give you 18 different reasons why they can't afford to pay you $100 a week to be their sound guy. I had a church reach out to me recently who was vetting and, had cast a broad net looking for sound engineers. And I gave them my rate, and they thought I was out of my mind. And I'm like, okay, I'm not your guy, because working for a church is a lot. It's a lot, dude. It's extra, it just is. It's extra. There's so many political hoops you got to jump through. There's so much bull butter that you got to deal with constantly. Church musicians think they're God's gift to everything, think they know everything about everything. God forbid you get a musician who has, Pro Tools on their MacBook at home, because they're going to tell you how to mix every single service. They're going to be doing everything they can do to exert their intellectual dominance over you, to prove to everyone at the church that they know more than you, and all that complete, utter bull butter. So, if I'm going to deal with all that, there's a price attached to that. In the secular world, I tend to just not answer the phone to those kind of clients. I've talked about that before. Yeah. In the church, I try to be more lenient because people are genuinely trying to do the best they can do. But it's a loaded environment, man. It just really, really is. They'll tell you they don't have money. I had a church wave a carrot in front of me for the last 3 years I worked for them, promising me a full-time, position and blah, blah, blah. And boy, we were up for it this year. Man, this is going to be the year. We really got, we got the funding, we got this and we got that. And they ended up hiring a full-time janitor over me. And that was the beginning of the end for me, because I had about had enough abuse. I had about had enough of being taken advantage of and being worked to death for very little financial compensation. Look, I'm all about you need ministry and financial compensation. So it wasn't like I hadn't volunteered and done my duty that way. Everything was in its correct place. But to come back and be like, no, we decided to hire a full-time janitor over the second most important guy in your whole Sunday morning service. And I'm not the only one who's ever said that. I have sat in technical conferences all over this country with some of the biggest names in evangelical Christianity and heard the pastors say that the sound guy is the second most important guy in the service. But you got money to hire a janitor instead of me. So that immediately told me kind of where their priorities are and just how much they valued the giftings and the talents that I brought to the table. So it wasn't, another 6 months or so, and I ended up kind of gracefully bowing out of that situation. I had already trained. I had like 30 volunteers underneath of me that I had trained and worked years with. I mean, guys that didn't know a trim knob from a Phillips screwdriver when they came in there, and 7 years later, they were actually half decent sound guys, So it wasn't like I left them empty-handed. But a guy can only take so much. And I have seen churches tell their house sound guys that are using junk equipment that only halfway wants to work, and they're just up against the wall before they even show up on Sunday morning to do their job. They don't have the right equipment. The equipment's not dialed in correctly. The church has invested zero into help train these volunteers. I mean, if you can't hire a full-time sound guy, at least twice a year hire somebody like me to come in there and teach a workshop and help them grow their skill set. I can't tell you how many churches won't even do that. But yet they got $12,000 to paint a mural on the side of the church. But they don't have $5,000 to upgrade some equipment in their Sunday morning sound system, the service, the day of the week that makes them all their money. We're just all on the same team here, trying to make this the best it can possibly be. And you don't have the resources to help that guy out who regularly comes in here week after week after week of his own accord, making $0 to mess with your half-ass worship team who barks at him and talks to him like a dog. I can't tell you how many workshops I've went and taught where there was a war between the tech team and the praise and worship team. And you know how I always diffuse those conflicts? I'd look at the worship team and say, how well would you perform this weekend if this was your first weekend ever picking up a guitar and someone put a sheet music in front of you and said, there you go, and play? Because that's exactly what you're asking out of these volunteers. These guys don't have any experience doing this. You guys are coming in here with decades of experience, and in many cases, thousands upon thousands of dollars worth of gear to do what you do. And then the church so devalues the importance of the tech team that they don't even invest any money in training or leadership, development on the tech team. And then you guys as the worship team have the nerve to talk to them like a bunch of dogs. They're doing the best they can do most of the time with a system that don't halfway work right. Or at the very least didn't get set up correctly. I've done tons of start scene, consultations where I just go in and create a general start scene that will work for everything that they do. So then the volunteers at least have a starting point every time they get at the console. They're not, the chips aren't stacked against them. Some of y'all are yelling at the camera right now because you know exactly what I'm talking about. I get it, dude. I've been there. I have sat in the board meetings with, board members who are mowing over, spending 20 grand on a $2 million building that they're building. And it's like 20 grand's all you got for this? This should be 80 or 100 grand install any day of the week. Equipment's not cheap. Doing this right is not cheap. But no, you know what they'll do? They'll find out that some local wedding DJ is attending their church. They'll go to him and ask him what he would do, which he has no experience as an installer, has no idea how to, sell the church the correct equipment for that room or anything about room tuning or, any of the things that all of us installers know, okay? They bring none of those skills to the table, but yet they'll pay him $1,000 to come in and call Sweetwater and buy a bunch of DJ equipment and hang it from the ceiling and put it on the walls. And then a year later, they're calling me again like, hey, dude, man, we did this big install. We spent all this money. And they spent like 5-6 grand. We spent all this money. And we're not happy. Anytime your church dictates its production systems by your budget instead of your program requirements, you're behind the 8 ball before you even get to the table. It's the truth. Church Production Magazine, back when there was such a thing, I don't even know if there is a Church Production Magazine anymore. I had a subscription to it for years and years and years. They said national, this was probably like, I don't know, the late 90s when they made this assessment. I'm sure it's way worse now. But they said national averages are a church will buy 3 production systems before they actually get the one that meets the needs of what they're trying to do as a church. If you're a church that has one dude playing an acoustic guitar and y'all are singing hymns, hey man, you can get away with a couple speakers on sticks. No problem. I'm not hating on you. But if you're a church that's got 2,500 people showing up every week and you got a full-on 12-piece, worship team trying to play through, a set of speakers on sticks and single 18s, you have missed it, my friend. You have missed it. And then you'll be the people who will crucify the volunteer sound guy because he can't make you sound like Elevation or Lakewood or fill in the blank or whatever your favorite worship team is. Look, when you go to those churches, they have a level of excellence you don't understand. And then they walk away, well, but they're a big church and they got all this money and blah, 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 and all this bull butter. You know what I have found out about churches? Churches always have money to do the things they want to do. The problem is they never want to put a bunch of money into something they don't understand. And they don't understand the importance of production. So if you get a guy that actually knows what he's doing, or if the church is smart enough to hire someone like me to come in and at least consult and say, hey, do this, this, and this, then you can get somewhere, even with volunteers. But you got to put something, you got to give them some resources, man, to do what you want them to do. We have none of that in the club. You know why? Because the club is smart enough to know that if the production systems are working correctly, most of the time they trust the band to bring that. Then they know the show's going to go off without a hitch. Everybody's going to enjoy the show. No one's distracted from the performance looking at the production system. How many times, pastors, let me talk to you for a second. How many times have you been sitting in your church and you're looking around and the congregation is more focused on how jacked up the production system is than the message they really need to hear? I mean, I could swing a dead cat and hit 5 pastors right now who would say, yeah, that's kind of what goes on at our church. Well, do something about it. Do something about it. You know, instead of hiring another janitor, which you can get anybody to volunteer to do, you know, that kind of work around the church, mow the grass, you know, things like that. I mean, there's guys, I know retired guys who live for that stuff. Like they got their little landscaping trailers, their zero turns, and man, come Saturday morning, 7 a.m., they're loading up. They're going to the church. They're going to mow the church that day. And they're all going to go to lunch afterwards, or they're going to have a pancake breakfast. They make a thing of it, dude, you know. It's their way of serving. But when it comes to doing production stuff, I can't tell you how many times that I sat in meetings where I was asked why my team wasn't growing faster. Yeah, I was evaluated more by my team building skills than I was by my actual technical skills to execute the insanity that they were doing every Sunday morning. We used to call it the weekly miracle because, brother, it was like light the fuse. Let's just see what's going to happen. You know, I mean, it was one of them kind of deals. And I'm like, well, it's kind of hard to teach somebody how to do all this in 6 months. It doesn't work that way. You realize people like intern for a year with someone like me just to get basic, fundamental, foundational knowledge of how to like turn stuff on without it catching on fire. It takes years to learn how to do this. I had some guys that worked under me who did put in that time and spent years with me, and they went on to be tech directors in other churches. You know, at one time in my local area, most of the tech guys in all the churches around the area either knew who I was, had been to one of my workshops, or I had been to their church and troubleshooted their rigs, did consultation and training to their staff. I was just as efficient in the church production scene as what I am in the secular scene. You know, I'm a go-getter kind of guy, so nothing's kind of in my way. I always go do what I feel led to do, you know. There was a ministry aspect to it. There was a lot of times I did it for free. There was a lot of times I didn't do it for free. Most of the time I didn't do it for free. Sometimes I would make it cheap enough that anybody could afford. There's no shortage of churches that need help with these kind of things. This is why I always tell young guys that are coming out of school and stuff who want mixed experience, go volunteer at a church. Yeah, it's going to suck getting up on Sunday morning after you've been gigging all weekend, but it's going to give you hands-on training with people who will show you grace and mercy, for the most part. But just be careful. Don't go in there thinking you're going to take over the thing and going to turn it into, the next Taj Mahal, Madison Square Gardens, production, because they'll probably never resource you in a manner to give you to do that. I remember I used to have to fight in the churches that had the money. Literally have to fight just to get money to buy, cables and mic stands and, just incidentals that you go through from year to year. It's just nuts. It's crazy. Churches need to treat their worship teams better. They need to treat their tech teams better. And worship teams need to treat their tech teams better. I hope I said all that right. Churches need to treat them better, and worship teams need to treat them better. And if you're not resourcing your tech team with proper equipment to do what you're asking them to do, especially in this day and age of streaming, then you need to call someone like me in your area and have them come in and help you get to where you want to go, suggest upgrades, suggest, more training with the guys, maybe take the guys out with them on another gig or something like that and give them a taste of just, how good it can really be. and invest in what you're trying to do, man. This whole idea, well, God will bless it, brother, God will bless it, drives me insane. I remember when I first got serious about serving God in 1994. I didn't even play drums in my church for the worship team for the first year. I did some tech work with them because they were in drastic, desperate need of tech help. But I was so, I want to say I was almost insulted by the level of lackadaisy attitude they had about learning music. And it's like, dude, when I was in bars and, was playing music for the enemy, per se, we spared no expense to make what we did the best it could be. But yet I go to church and everybody's kind of got this half-hearted attitude toward learning the music. And I've seen guys who are geniuses, music directors, and are really, really good at giving people the music weeks ahead of time, would write out these arrangements around the lyrics of the song so you didn't have to read manuscript, sheet music. You could just kind of follow A, G, D, around the lyrics of the song. It was absolutely genius. He couldn't have spoon-fed it to you any better, and still had people show up on Thursday nights and don't know the music, haven't even listened to it. Like, you're wasting the guy's time. In a secular band, they tolerate that maybe once or twice and be like, we need to find somebody else. Or somebody needs to tighten this dude up because this is a waste of time. You do the homework at home. Rehearsal's where you just put it together. That's it. If you're having to listen to the song 3 times at rehearsal to try to figure out your parts, you probably shouldn't be on stage, dude. You really shouldn't. I could sit here and tell you story after story after story after story of nightmare situations that I have dealt with inside of the church that would have never been tolerated in the secular world. And that's a damn shame. It really is. In my personal, humble opinion, Jesus paid too high of a price hanging on a cross for our salvation for us to go in there and half-ass Sunday morning. When you were out Friday and Saturday night with your cover band, pouring everything you got into that, you showed up at those rehearsals knowing how to do everything. But you don't show up to Thursday night worship team rehearsal knowing your music? You need to get right, dude. That's all I'm saying. I don't know where you come from, but the church culture I come from, you need to get right, man. When you realize, and I'm just going to kind of get off into the spiritual side of this for 10 seconds here, bear with me. When you realize the impact really good Christian music has on creating an environment that opens people's hearts to the gospel, then you'll start taking that seriously. The second you can tap into that. I can remember sitting behind the drums the first time when I really got serious about serving God in 94, and believe me, I looked like a circus freak compared to everybody else in the church. I was this little country West Virginia Pentecostal church. I had both sides of my head shaved, dressed in all black. I was right off the road with my metal band. You know what I'm saying? Like, all I knew is I love Jesus. And people stared at me and made fun of me and talked behind my back, and I didn't care. I don't care. They can say whatever they want to say. I'm not judging anybody. I'm in love with Jesus. The first time I seen somebody come to that altar and give their life to the Lord and knew that what I had done with the praise and worship team played some little microscopic role in that happening, broke me to my core. I was weeping behind the drums watching that happen. It gets to me even today. That's why it's important. That's why maybe some of you guys need to kind of change your attitude about how you approach your worship team, Especially if you got a guy who's in there that's really genuinely trying to get it right and trying to get everybody lined up and trying to work with the low skill people and get them where they need to be and trying to reel in the high skill people with the egos and just trying to get everybody to work together so that we can see them people come up to the altar and give their life to the Lord. That's a reward you can't measure with dollars and cents. And there's times I'm sitting in nightclubs, mixing bands, and I know I have no delusions or illusions of grandeur about this. I'm there for the money, dude. This serves no other purpose. I'm there for the money. I'm there to be a team player with the band and help the band get where they want to go. They're about making money and about getting recognition on stage. I'm trying to be everything that I could be, to be part of that and to help get them where they need to be. But on the church production side of it, everything that I'm doing is to create a warm environment for the Holy Spirit to do what it has to do, and for hopefully maybe a family member that their family's been praying for them for 10 years and they finally got them to church, and you were able to be part of this environment that's conducive to healing and restoration. When you start understanding that, you will start looking at your church worship team differently. And there's some pastors that need to hear that too. It just is. I'm all preaching up on a soapbox this week, man. I need to save this for the ministry channel. I don't get it. It never made sense to me. It never made sense to me when I came off the road in 1994 and stepped into that country church and everybody just don't even care. I'm like, rehearsal's over. We never even got the songs together. I'm like, what do you mean rehearsal's over? Like, I'm used to rehearsing until it's right. No, God will bless it, brother. It'll be okay. It'll be all right. And we didn't do Sunday morning rehearsals. See, some of the other churches I worked at, they did Thursday night and an early morning Sunday morning rehearsal before the service. Some would even do a dress rehearsal of the service minus the sermon before the first service. So they do rehearsal with the band, dress rehearsal where we run through everything with everything that's going to happen. The whole thing was scripted. Then, your first service of the morning, we had 3 services in that particular church every Sunday morning. Yeah. So I could sit here and look, there's 1,000 other YouTube channels you can go to, especially with church production, that will tell you 1,000 different ways to mix a Sunday morning service at the church. You don't really need to hear that, okay? I've told you my 2 different mix philosophies. All the other incidentals of mixing either environment really depends on the band. Really depends on how they approach the instrument, how loud they are, the quality of the instrument, the tone, the way they approach the mic when they're singing. All those things change all the mix criteria. So I'm not going to sit here and bore you with all that. You can go find that anywhere. What you can't find is the honest-to-God elephant in the room about why most church worship teams are horrible. It's because they don't take it seriously. It's an afterthought, and the church does very little to invest in their worship team or their tech team. You should be sending your worship team out to a worship conference at least once a year. Excuse me. I mean, you got money to do everything else that you want to do around the church. At least most churches do. Oh, they'll claim and cry poor mouth, but you go look at their accounts, that's a whole different thing altogether. Some backwoods country churches don't have that, and I get it. I know I don't want to paint with that broad of a brush stroke, but I know a whole lot of churches that cry poor mouth, but they seem to always come up with that money when they want to do something they want to do. Hey guys, I'm just trying to bookend this video with a real quick request. Could you please subscribe to the channel? 48% of you guys watching right now are not subscribed to the channel. And if you really dig what I'm doing here, please think about becoming a member of the channel. For about the price of a cup of coffee a week, you get over to all the member videos. The member videos will never go public, okay? They're always going to be member-only videos. And I talk about some pretty interesting things over there. I do vlogs over there and kind of just let you into my goofy little world and tell you all the crazy stuff that's going on in CLP audio land. For about $5 a month, dude, you can be part of all that and support what I'm trying to do here, which helps me continue to get this content to you guys. I love you. I'll see you next time.